Boy, my
Yeah.
dreaming mechanism just like didn't waste any time. I just went to bed at 7 after we meditated.
Okay.
It's cold.
Is it? Yeah.
Is it cold there?
Our house is pretty warm right now. It's 72. So
Good.
it's nice.
Well, we don't.
It
We
is
didn't.
cold. It's cold outside. I'm sure it's like in the mid 50s or something.
Right. We don't have anything to heat our house going right now because it was summer. It's been summer. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm setting
Yeah,
up
sure.
follow liker for you, and immediately came into a question I had to write support about. That's for your Instagram. So your student, this is a yoga student.
Yeah, she's somebody that I she was part of the yoga teacher training. She was one of the students in the yoga teacher training years ago,
Uh huh. Did she come for
and
body work or
she's actually,
yoga?
yeah, she's an experienced teacher now,
Oh, okay.
and she had been doing some support things with the teacher training, just copies and organizing treats and just getting people into the into the yoga hall and all that sort of stuff. But now she's stepped up and she's running the part of the program where each weekend the students start practice teaching. And so she's organizing that, what poses they're going to teach and who's going to be in the teaching groups.
Hmm.
And because we have like 2 or 3 teachers groups and we separate them and then they go through the poses that they're learning and they're teaching and learning how to teach. And then she goes around with other teachers and they observe
Hmm.
and then have nice comments for them so that they feel
Right.
good about themselves because it's really intimidating to learn how to teach the poses. They know the poses, but
Yeah.
they don't know how to describe how to do them yet.
Oh, okay.
And so the program really focuses a lot on that, on the ability to get in front of a class and teach students how to do the poses.
Huh.
It's a big part of the course.
Wow.
A lot of energy goes towards that, and so she's doing that now. So she's a very experienced teacher at this point. She's been teaching for probably 5 years, 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and
So
so
is she
yeah, she
teaching yoga or is she teaching teachers? Is she teaching yoga teachers?
she has a yoga class that she's been teaching for several years at a
Yoga.
community center, and now
Okay.
she's teaching teachers.
Oh, she is. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so she's
good.
stepped up. I
Wow.
stepped out of the program, and so we had to have a big shift. So two of the people, Michelle is another person who's been um, has had a very large contribution to the course, and she's stepped away from it as well, or she's really limiting her contribution to the course now. So we've had to have a whole new generation step up
Hmm.
this year.
So is this, I'm just curious, help me understand, is this a part of Ananda?
Yes, yeah, it's a Nanda Yoga teacher training program.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Huh.
So we had the two of us, two of the primary teachers of the course, both. I stepped away, so I'm not teaching any longer in the course. And then someone who had even a larger role than I did has decided that she only wants to do a small amount of teaching.
Huh.
We've got of the three primary teachers for the program, two have stepped away to some
Huh.
extent. So
Wow.
it's a big shift. Yeah,
Well, it gives other people opportunities, so that's good.
it is. It's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Michelle and I are burning out on it, so it's good to replace it at this point.
So, for how many years had you taught? You were teaching yoga or teaching teachers?
I've been teaching yoga since 2008, 2007, 2008.
Wow.
And it was just a couple of years after I graduated from the program that I started teaching the anatomy for the program.
Huh.
And I've been teaching ever since. I'd say I'd been teaching the Ananda Teachers Program, part of it, for 8 years.
For 10 years. Oh, to 8 years. Yeah.
Yeah, for 8 years.
Wow.
And Michelle had been teaching maybe the program for 9 years.
And that's, I'm sorry, you probably just said it, but it's my sleepiness. That's teaching yoga or teaching yoga teachers?
Teaching yoga teachers.
Wow. Right.
And I started teaching yoga almost immediately after I graduated from the program. So I've been teaching yoga for 10 years.
Okay. You've been teaching yoga for 10 years and teaching yoga teachers for
For 8.
8.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know, actually.
Yeah. So it's
How did you
two.
begin?
How did I
How
say
did
again?
it begin? I mean, were you already a massage therapist at the time?
Yeah, I was. I started massage therapy in 1994, in the spring of 94, and took the yoga teacher training in 2007. So it was 2007 to 2008. It goes from September to February.
Uh-huh.
And in 2008, in February, I started teaching yoga students, not yoga teacher trainees.
Right.
And then I believe it was in 2010 that I started teaching the Ananda yoga teacher training.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that come to be? How did you actually get interested in yoga?
Um, it was part of like my own self rehab, really. Um, I didn't do physical therapy because I didn't have any insurance. And so I just started learning about, I was already a massage therapist. And so I started learning about physical therapy. I went to a bookshop.
You learned about physical therapy?
I did. I went to a bookshop and bought a college text on physical therapy and started studying that. And didn't take long before I realized that it wasn't going to work for me.
And from there you went to yoga.
Yeah, well, from there I went to the monkey bars across the street, the local grade school.
Okay. Um,
And yeah, and then I went to I learned about energy and the chakras and the energy system of the body. And I took several craniosacral courses because craniosacral deals with energy. Just a different way of manipulating energy, really, and feeling energy and treating people through their energy system with the craniosacral system. So I started learning that. Then I started changing how I was doing massage so I wasn't in so much pain because I was in severe pain for several years trying to do massage therapy. And it was just kind of step by step. I think by about 2002, 2003, I started taking yoga classes, going to yoga classes, and then I started applying yoga principles to how I moved around the table and how I worked on people. So it's kind of like, you know what a warrior two pose is?
Yeah.
Started using warrior two a lot, moving around the table.
Yeah.
You know, going down into a lunge, bringing my body down towards the client, learning how to shift my weight from my pelvis.
Instead of bending over.
Started learning about posture and how to use my spine.
Wow.
And it was successful. I went from being in severe pain doing massage therapy. Especially at the end of the day, I'd be just exhausted and just racked with pain. And then, I don't know, so a few years, 2004, 5, 6, 7, I was going to yoga classes. I was doing yoga every day. And after a number of years, my pain levels were going down and down and down and down and down. It's getting better and better and better.
It took years.
Yeah, for several years, and then by 2007, I was approached. Actually, yeah, I learned about the Ananda Yoga teacher training. I thought, yeah, this is great. I'll go ahead and do that. So I wanted to learn more about yoga. Didn't really think I was going to teach it, but I just wanted to learn more about it. And then taking the course, I saw that yoga was about moving through the fascial system. And this was, kind of new stuff for me, and nobody was doing the yoga teacher training that I was in was not teaching towards connective tissues. It was just teaching about muscles. And I saw that was incomplete.
Your experience was this is not just muscle.
It's not just muscle.
It wasn't a part of the training that was given.
Yeah,
it was your own experience.
Yeah, it wasn't part of the training that was given, but in the class I was like, well, in class discussions I was saying, well, this is fascia. You can't just think about the muscles. You have to think about the fascia too. Muscle actions don't describe how you move your body in space, and do yoga. It's just incomplete. You can't describe it that way.
Really?
We have to develop a new way of understanding it. And so one of the primary teachers of the course, the woman who actually was the architect of the Ananda Yoga teacher training in Seattle, left and went down to Ananda Village in California. And so Murali, who's now the director of Ananda Yoga, stepped into her role. And then they asked Michelle and I to join the program and help teach it. And Murali just said, it was because you were so interested in the anatomy. You were talking about fascia and stuff. He says, you were the choice, hands down, so we just asked you. So that's how I joined that program, and then it became really obvious to me in trying to develop an anatomy program for yoga that musculoskeletal anatomy was just not enough. It just kept breaking down for me. I couldn't describe the poses as a series of muscle actions.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was a huge education for me. I spent, several years developing the anatomy portion of the program and just learning tons and tons about how the body really works, or really seems to work, because it's all it was all empirical, right? Just trial and error. Do the poses, figure out, well, in some ways when you do poses, you do things that that support you in the pose, but that don't seem to make any sense anatomically. Like if you're on the floor and you're trying to do a pose called, say, locust, where you lift your legs up off the floor and you lift your torso up off the floor and you have your arms behind you. It's like you're flying through the air like a locust.
Uh-huh.
It works better if you push out through your heels and lengthen through the heels. And Willie and I spent hours trying to figure out why the hell that worked. Pardon my French, but we spent hours trying to figure out, why does this work?
Huh.
Or actually, he asked me, he says, can you figure out why this works? And I just sat down for a few hours and I was doing the pose and this and stuff, and I was just saying, well, it's because you're firming the fascia up. You're not contracting this muscle or that muscle, you're firming the fascia up. And in firming the fascia up, it firms up the bones and joints that the fascia is over, and so you get a sensation of lengthening through your body and support.
From firming fascia, not from contracting muscles.
Not from contracting muscles.
Holding your bones in a certain position.
Yeah, contracting muscles is contractive. You know, and that's the thing. It's like you can't. In yoga poses, we try to expand into the pose, don't we? We like to lengthen. We want to stretch into the pose. And you can't describe that musculoskeletally.
Boy, do we need
Because it's all
Jessica.
Huh?
I want to see the fascia in the look. You know, it's like all these poses, just the fascia. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, right?
And
yeah.
how it
But
feels.
we think in terms of how we stretch a muscle, or we think in terms of how we contract a muscle. It's
Or
all
what muscles
contraction.
are holding us in a pose.
Yeah, but
When
the thing
maybe
is,
it's the
is
fascia holding us in a pose, not the muscles.
yeah, well, the muscle is embedded within the fascia.
It's not the other way around.
No, it's not.
The muscle is
It's not.
embedded in the fascia. It's not the fascia is embedded in the muscle.
No, yeah, it's like it not only contains the muscle, it's embedded within the muscle. It's the very matrix of the muscle is the fascia.
But,
And if you start
but
thinking,
you didn't say the muscles, the fascia is embedded in the muscle. The first way you said it was the muscle's embedded in the fascia.
yeah, it's both. It's both.
Yeah, I mean they're working together apparently, but I mean the shift in your perspective is the muscle is actually in the fascia, not
Yeah.
the fascia's in the muscle.
Yeah, but again, it is actually both.
Yeah. Yeah.
The muscle without the fascia is just goo on the floor.
Cool.
Yeah. You take away the fascia, and
Cool.
you got what you have left. What you have left are the chemical components of the human body.
Without the fascia.
It's just a puddle on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but you can't do a yoga pose just stretching or contracting.
Reminds me of what you were saying the other day about Iyengar saying hug the muscles against the bones, and you do
Yeah.
that with fascia.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
And I
done
call
with
that-
contraction or
I call that either engaging the fascia or firming the fascia.
Hmm.
And it's within that hugging the muscle to the bone or firming the fascia that you support joints. You can't do it by stretching, and you can't do it by contracting. Well, you can, but in yoga, it's all about expansion, isn't it? You know, it's all about getting bigger somehow. And you can't get bigger through contraction. you only get smaller. So what makes you big in a yoga pose? It's the fascia. It's the energy. Yeah. So it's it's hard to talk about because we don't really have a language to use to talk about it.
Right.
That's. Mm-hmm.
We're,
It's an alarm going off. If you hear the little music going.
it's pretty.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the difficulty in trying to teach what I teach and try to help people understand what I do as a body worker. Because people want to have exercises and they want to have stretches. You know, and the exercises to strengthen the muscles and make them contract better.
Yeah.
Right? And the stretches to stretch the muscles out. And fascially, those are nonsense terms. They don't really mean anything if you look at it in a fascial perspective.
Yeah.
It breaks down. So how do you talk about it?
Right.
When
When you say
we're all trained to think of going to the gym and making bigger muscles.
right.
But that's all through contraction. And then once you contract it all down and compact it and make it bigger and bigger and bigger, buffer muscles, then in order to avoid being muscle bound, then you have to learn how to stretch it back out again. And it's this continual battle between getting buff and not losing function. So we talk about being muscle bound. Muscles get too big.
Have you ever had a very lean, muscular patient?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of times. I've had body workers too, and quite honestly, I prefer not to work on body workers because their muscles are they're too big, they're too hard, they're too pressed into the out into the fascial bags, if you will, that contain the muscle. It's just hard to get in and work on them. And I don't want to break my body on one client, so I prefer not to work on people who build their bodies.
Bodybuilders, you mean?
Bodybuilders, yeah.
Yeah. Body
Luckily, I don't
workers are
see
like
any of
you.
them.
Massage therapists. You mean
Yeah,
bodybuilders? Yeah.
Yeah. So I prefer not to work on people who are doing that to their bodies.
Huh.
Because it's too hard for me to work on them. I just let somebody else who's a lot bigger than me try to deal with that. I'm only 5'7". I'm a slender build, and working on some big buff guy is honestly, it's not worth it because I could hurt myself.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, there's that shift that you have to make when you start thinking about fascia, because it doesn't fit our concepts of how our bodies work, because we're thinking in terms of contracting muscles and making them bigger and stronger and stretching them back out again, right? And we think that when we have an ache or a pain, that what's going to fix it is just finding the right stretch that's going to fix it. And that's it can be a very temporary thing, because the stretch doesn't seem to change the structure that much. You might do it momentarily, but it doesn't seem to change structure that much.
So what changes
might be able to-
structure is the
It's the fascia.
so affecting the fascia with body work and with practices like core integration.
Yeah, like the core integration. Then you can change the constituent components, I guess, of the fascial system. You can begin to build the fascial system, and you can get it to lengthen and you can get it to strengthen, but it takes time. It takes longer to change fascia than it takes to change muscle. And so stretching fascia is an interesting concept because fascia has characteristics, and one of the characteristics is that it's elastic. And then you run through the elastic portion of the fascia itself, and then you hit a point where you have other kinds of fascia have great tensile strength and they don't stretch. So you have elastin and you have collagen. The elastin is the elastic stuff, collagen is the strong stuff. So you can only stretch fascia so far until it hits that point where the elastin hits its end point, and then the collagen takes over, because they're all interwoven, the collagen and the elastin.
All fascia is made of both.
Yeah. And so you go through the elastic phase, and then you get into the phase of the collagen, which has great tensile strength. Once you get into that stage of a stretch, and you overstretch, that's when you start having what we call muscle tears. There's actually fascial tears. You start breaking strands of fascia, and that's what of collagen, and that's what constitutes a muscle tear. You break enough strands, and then you tear through the muscle. So it's not the muscle that's being torn; it's collagen fibers that are being broken. It's like take a thread and you snap it really hard and you'll break it. And that's a muscle tear. If you have enough of those strands that break, then we call it a tear. So stretching fascia is all about just going through the elastic phase of fascia elongating and stretching. And you don't really want to work too hard on a stretch, because what will happen is the tendons and ligaments are also fascia, and they have a higher degree of collagen over elastin, although ligaments and tendons are elastic too, to a certain extent, just to a lesser extent than say the muscle belly portion of that structure. And so if you start hanging in your joints, like you start stretching out ligaments and tendons using really hard stretching techniques, like you're really pulling yourself down into a forward bend to get your hamstrings to stretch out, what happens is you start to damage the ligaments and the tendons, and you stretch them out beyond their capacity to spring back. So in effect, it's like the waistband of a pair of underpants or something, right? You wash them out 100 times, and you stretch them out 500 times, 1,000 times, and eventually they lose their elasticity, right? And it's the same with fascia. If you stretch it too much, you eventually lose your elastic range, and then you have joint instability and joint degeneration. So you have to be careful about what you're doing when you're stretching things out. Because if you're looking for lasting change, and you go at it really too hard and start breaking down these structures, then you stretch out too much, just butt up to the end of it, over time, the fascial tissue is going to be remodeled physiologically. Not because you're stretching it out, but because you're making the demand on the tissue. And then the cells within the fascial tissue will respond and they will change the length and consistency of the fascia due to the demand placed on it. Yeah, that's muscle. Muscle has muscle length is determined by how many they call them sarcomeres. And sarcomeres are the structure that kind of wrap it in and out, and that's what constitutes contraction and damping in the muscles. And so yeah, the muscle will change too. So the muscle determines and can grow more sarcomeres. So that's also a fascial process because again, if the muscle itself is not encased with fascial matrix, it's just a pile of goo. So in order for more sarcomeres added into the muscle, the whole matrix of that muscle and the muscle tissue itself has to be created in order for length also to increase. So it's all about myofascia, right? That muscle fascia matrix has to be, the sarcomeres have to be created and added into that chain, that long chain that we call muscle. And each of the muscles is composed of bundles of these fibers, all containing sarcomeres of similar length. And so in order for the muscle to actually get longer, so you have more joint range of motion, you actually have to build muscle. You have to build the myofascia. So there's no spiritually back in the day. Because Buddha saw that a lot of people around him were giving up all volition, personal volition to God. Well, God will take care of that for me, right? Other people thought, well, no, the way to get to God is to do practices that they call tapasya, like burning away all the bad stuff. And so we've all heard of, like, in the Middle Ages, people were like self-flagellating, hitting themselves with whips, or wearing hair shirts, or sleeping on beds of nails, and that sort of thing. And those were all acts of, what do they call that? Tapasya, but also inflicting, I'm trying to think of what the name of that is, but anyway, it's a process of trying to make of limiting yourself, limiting your ego by making ego pursuits bad. And so in those practices, Buddha did that for a long time. He started doing yoga poses that were really extreme yoga poses. He started doing things like starving himself, because that was a way of breaking yourself of desire. So he started doing all of these really extreme practices, and became really, really good at it.
Austerities.
But then
Thank you, Russ.
Austerities, yeah. Doing austerities, right? Doing these austere practices. And so eventually, in meditation, he realized, he came to this blinding realization that giving it all to God, or doing these austerities to change yourself, to make yourself pure enough for God, didn't work. And there had to be a middle way. There had to be some path between the extremes that got you to liberation. And that's Buddhism in a nutshell.
Right.
It's finding that middle course,
Right.
that middle way.
But it's not
So
just
that
it's not just totally surrendering to the conditions of your life or your body.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting to, is that there's this balance I'm trying to make between balance or, well, actually totally giving up maybe isn't really balance. To have some discipline. Like for me, my whole life I've been standing on my right leg. I didn't even realize it. Now I'm trying to stand on both legs. It's really hard. And
Yeah.
that's a really good analogy for balance. I'm balanced in between, and it's not, my body wants to pull me over to the side that I've always been on.
The first powerful this is like up. To create this kind of posture. creates the structure of the myofascial system. And then the myofascial system supports the skeletal system. But in order to put all that function in the first place, and you do that by using the nervous system. So neuromyofascial cord. So you just start putting these words together, and you come up with a full body of those systems methodology. Yeah. You do. Yeah, it is. You think that initially that neuromyofascial skeletal process is will. It's the willingness to do it in the first place. And you're going to have a real misconception there between willpower and willpower. What happens is you start to go down that avenue of using austerities. Unleashed, doesn't it? Really, yeah. I guess really what we're talking about is in order to become willing, you have to awaken the energy. But then you have to know what the proper use of energy is. Is it towards ego satisfaction, or is it towards the relinquishment of, egotistical nature of the human being? The egotistical nature of a human being, right? It's that ego. It's that small self. Yeah. Yeah, and if you're pushing it too much, that idea of what insight is, and that insight is the activation of self. On a state of willingness. Yeah. Yeah. They're based upon the concept of scarcity. And Yogananda calls that poverty consciousness and not expansive. Yeah. When we feel that there are limitations, and the limitations are all about getting more than your fair share. It's like, in order for you to get what you want, you have to limit those around you, right? You gotta push the competition down in order for you to attain the millions or billions or trillions of dollars. That means that you're trying to just feed yourself and nobody else, or maybe your small segment or something. That's all ego consciousness, and That's the ultimate attainment. You get to the pinnacle of the world, and then there you are. What next? Yeah, alone. Yeah, what next? Where do you go from there? Or you start to realize that there are like being president of the United States. You think you're going to be the most powerful individual in the world, and then you find out that you're not. Yeah. We've got this huge lesson out there, in the White House teaching us all about the use of power. Yeah. He's our teacher. Whether you like it or not, he's our teacher. He is. Anyway, well, let's call her good for now, and I will see you Wednesday.